So there are fears of more airstrikes in Jenin refugee camp after Monday firing of missiles from drones. The attacks by the Israeli army have since been described as the biggest assault in 20 years. Saleh Hijaz is an activist and he joins us now for the very latest on this. Saleh, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with an introduction of Jenin refugee camp for our viewers. What do we need to know?
Hi, Dudu, and greetings to all the viewers. First, let me say the Palestinians joined South Africa in the mourning the loss of Dr. Ashraf Bahad, who passed away on Thursday. I had the great honor of meeting him last year. He played a crucial role in the fight against South African apartheid throughout his life and demonstrated an unwavering commitment and dedication to the causes of freedom, justice, and equality, including in Palestine. His passing is a significant loss, not just for South Africa, but also for Palestine. Returning to your question, Dudu, it's crucial to kind of set the context here. What happened in Jenin earlier this week was a massacre. It is the most recent attack, which is part and parcel of Israel's colonial policies towards Palestinians, which have been documented and analyzed by a number of organizations, including the United Nations, human rights organizations like Amnesty International, as constituting a crime against humanity of apartheid. South Africans know too well how apartheid uses systematic killing and forcible displacement and other human rights violations to ensure domination of the colonized over the colonizer. We only need to remember Soweto, which was commemorated last month. About Jenin. Jenin is the name of a district that is segregated in the northern part of the occupied West Bank. Within it, there's a city of the same name. It is akin to Bantustan, and the entire district is smaller than the city of Johannesburg. Within the city, there's a very small Jenin refugee camp, which is akin to a township in South Africa. Palestinians who live in there are refugees who were forcibly expelled from their homes by Zionist and later Israeli forces in 1948, in what we Palestinians call the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine that took place around that time. Today, they are amongst the poorest communities in colonized Palestine, systematically deprived by apartheid Israel of any forms of equal rights. Apartheid Israel forces routinely raid the city and the refugee camp in particular, and use extreme violence during these raids, often leaving trails of murders and property destruction, which they try to hide. Last year, it's very important to remember that during one such raid in Jenin, prominent journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was targeted and killed by an Israeli sniper. Now, what happened this last week in this massacre? According to the United Nations, 12 Palestinians, including 4 children, were murdered in Jenin during this military attack. 143 Palestinians were injured and 20 of them remain in critical condition. To give just one example, an Israeli sniper shot dead 16-year-old Abdurrahman Hardan in the head with live ammunition at around 1 p.m. on the 4th of July, as he stood in front of Al-Amal Hospital in Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. And this is a documentation according to the Defense of All Children International, which is a human rights organization that follows human rights violations against children. Ambulances and paramedics were attacked and prevented from reaching and administering vital first aid to injured Palestinians, and tear gas was shot at the hospital that was treating those who were injured. I think it's also very important to remember that this recent massacre comes only a few weeks after a massacre in Gaza in May, when many Palestinians, including children, were murdered. And there were many other massacres the years before. So the attack on Jenin brings the tally of Palestinians murdered over the past 12 months to almost 300. Around 60 are boys and girls, and there are 9 women. Now, of course, all of them have names, families, dreams. They went to schools, they had a future. But just to put it in perspective, if we are to compare relatively to South Africa in terms of the number of population of people and those who were murdered, it would be around 1,500 South Africans with 250 children killed in the past 12 months.
Saleh, the United Nations chief, Antonio Guterres, has condemned Israel's raid on Jenin refugee camp. You spoke of the role played by the United Nations, Amnesty International, etc. Is this enough, the condemnation of the UN chief?
Absolutely not. It's not enough at all. apartheid Israel's policies of systematic killings and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians happen only because of complicity of states, corporations, and institutions. The reason why we have Israel acting with such impunity is because it's only words that we get when we have massacres such as the one that happened in Jenin and the one before it in Gaza and the one before it last year. It is not enough. What we need is an end to this complicity with apartheid Israel, for it to be isolated, exactly similar to what happened in apartheid South Africa, is for apartheid regimes to be isolated and for sanctions to be imposed against them. We need action from the United Nations, from Guterres, and not only words that keep repeated massacre after massacre. And here, we in Palestine, we have a grassroots call, calling for pressure on states and institutions to impose a comprehensive military security embargo in Israel now. Now, we needed this way before and we need it still now, which must include ending, for example, U.S., the most complicit here is, of course, Western states in the global north, the United States in particular, but also the European Union and the United Kingdom. We need an arms to stop the arms and military funding of Israel. The U.S. is Israel's main partner in crime, is partly responsible for the murder of Palestinians. So is the UK government and the European Union. So we call for pressure on the UN to heed the Palestinian-led global call and launch an investigation into Israeli apartheid that will eventually impose sanctions on it. We're past the time where condemnations and words are important or have any meaning here.
How would you describe the situation there today, or the atmosphere, or the mood?
Look, it's a very dark moment in Palestinian history and in Palestinian community. But we're always hopeful. We are a resilient people. We remain steadfast in our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. But we need the help of others. We need the help of others, and particularly we hold South Africa and South Africans in a special place here because of our history of joint struggle, of camaraderie, of standing shoulder to shoulder against apartheid when it was there in South Africa. So Palestinians deeply appreciate the support from South Africans for our struggle, which, as I said, South Africans know too well. We appreciate the call from South Africans which respond to our demands for a boycott, divestment, and sanctions to isolate Israel towards the full dismantlement of settler colonialism and apartheid, just like what happened in South Africa. So we find it most crucial that South African government upholds the tenets of international law and takes decisive action, including at the United Nations, calling for the reinstatement of, for example, the anti-apartheid mechanisms that were there and played a crucial role in bringing down apartheid in South Africa. South Africans who are responding to the BDS call on the ground are also calling on their government to declare the apartheid Israeli ambassador in Pretoria persona non grata and break off all diplomatic relations with Israel. This is a must. There should be no relations with apartheid. Apartheid has no place in the world, and particularly South Africa should not have any relations with apartheid Israel. South Africa must heed the call of the Palestinian people to isolate apartheid Israel through the boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. And here I want to also comment on a call that came out from South African comrades calling on the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA, to expedite the cases of South Africans serving in the occupation forces, in the apartheid Israeli forces, in contravention of the South African regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act. This is incomprehensible that you have South Africans serving in the Israeli army and being perhaps part of this massacre that took place in Jenin earlier this week and one before it in Gaza and so on. The Department of Sports, Arts and Culture also is to implement a policy for a sports and cultural boycott. The government, the South African Football Association, and all sporting codes must publicly call on Orlando Pirates, who are scheduled to play a friendly with apartheid Israeli team Maccabi Tel Aviv in Spain later this month. This game should not happen. A football team in South Africa should not, there's nothing friendly about apartheid, and a football team from South Africa should never play with an apartheid team from Israel. So there's much to be done. We're looking to the South African people, to the South African leadership, to really stand shoulder to shoulder with us, like we've done in the past, in isolating apartheid Israel and eventually dismantling this system of settler colonialism and apartheid.
Saleh Hijaz is an activist joining us from Palestine. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.